Hi, in this video I'll take a look at how to mimic sidechain compression in Eurorack. There are some modules available that offer sidechain compression. WMD has a nice dedicated compressor, and Endorphin ES has a module that has a compression setting with a sidechain input too. I've had at least one of these modules in my virtual rack on Modular Grid for a long time, but for some reason I'm not buying them when I get the chance. I guess spending several hundreds of euros on a module for just sidechaining is not worth it. For me at least, it isn't. Luckily, there are different ways we can achieve a sidechain compression sound with other modules too. And I'm pretty sure, even if you have a really small system, you'll have something that will do the job. If not, then this video will give you some pointers what to look for in the second-hand bin at your local modular supplier. And before I start, I'm sure everyone knows what I mean with the term sidechain or sidechain compression, but to be clear, I'm talking about something like this. First, let's take a look at the elements we need to make our bass or sample or whatever duck when the kick drum hits. We need to lower the volume of the sound, so we're going to need a VCA for this. There are ways to make it work without a VCA, but we'll get to that later in the video. We need to extract an envelope from the kick drum. There are several ways you could do this, and we need to combine this envelope with the gate or envelope that's controlling the general amplitude of your synth to lower the volume of that sound momentarily. And there are several ways to do that too. So this is the sound we want to process. It's an oscillator coming from Generate 3's full output. Currently I have it patched through mimick. So it's going to the first channel of mimick, which is a 4-quadrant multiplier or a bipolar VCA. But for the method I'm about to explain, it really doesn't matter what kind of VCA you use. There's 5 volts normalized to the CV knob, which means we can control the amplitude of the sound with the knob, as long there's no control voltage connected to the according jack. And this is true for most VCAs that have an attenuator for the CV input. Now let's patch in a gate pattern to open and close this VCA. This is a random gate pattern coming from Pamela's new workout. You could use anything for this. You will probably want to shape the envelope of your sound so it doesn't open and close abruptly like it's doing now. But for now, let's stick to the gate. Let's listen to the kick drum. I have the trigger for my kick drum melted with a stackable. You could use a multiple for this. It doesn't need to be buffered as we're only extracting triggers here. Let's connect it to channel 1 of MADS. I'm using the trigger input for this. Let's take a look at the envelope that's coming out of MADS. I'll patch it up to zero scope. So as you can see, let me adjust the settings here a little bit so you can actually see it a little bit better. So as you hopefully can see on zero scope, this is the envelope we'll use to duck our synth sound. But for that to work, we first need to invert the envelope. We can do this on MADS by turning the according attenuator completely to the left, and as you can see on the scope, the envelope is inverted. You can shape this envelope, of course, but we'll come to that later. Now in mimick, the 2 VCAs are normalized to each other, which means I can chain the VCAs without having to connect a cable from the output of the first VCA to the input of the second. You might think if you connect this inverted VCA to the CV input of the second VCA, that you would make the sound duck, but that's simply not true, because most VCAs just ignore the negative portion of a signal coming in into the CV input, at least. And a bipolar VCA will actually open up the VCA even if the control voltage coming in is negative. The only difference is that the sound will be inverted when it opens up from negative voltage. So to achieve a ducking effect, we need to offset the envelope that's been extracted from the kick drum trigger. Now in MADS we can do this by using the sum output and using channel 2 or 3 to offset our CV. So let's patch this. Currently all the channels are at 0 position, except for the first one that's sending out the inverted envelope. So I'm using the sum output of MADS, and you will see when I turn, I'll use the third channel on MADS. to offset it. You will see on the scope, hopefully. Let me put on. So now there's a line at 0 on the scope. I hope you can see that. If I offset it, you can see how most of the envelope rises above 0. So it's an inverted envelope, but we offset it with a positive signal, so it's actually above 0. And if we patch this to our VCA, we'll hear the ducking effect. First, let's listen to the output of the second VCA. So currently the output of the first VCA is going into the second VCA because these are normalized internally. And the sound coming out of the second VCA, that's the sound we're listening to. It's been gated by the random gate pattern on Pamela. And now we'll use this inverted offsetted signal coming from channel 1 from Mats to make the ducking effect. And as you can hear, now we have achieved the sidechain compression sound we were looking for. Now for something a little more sculpted, you can use an envelope for your main sound instead of just a simple gate. For this I will use channel 4 of Mats, but you could use any envelope or function generator at this point. I'm doing it this way so everything stays nice in frame. So I'll patch up the gate pattern that was coming from Pamela into the trigger input of channel 4 of Mats. And just by listening now, because we removed the gated pattern from the synth line, you can really hear how the sound ducks when there's a kick drum. So this is all happening right now in the second channel of the VCA. I could just as well patch the sound coming from Generate into this second one. It sounds the same, as these are, like I said, normalized together. So the gated pattern coming from Pamela is going into the trigger input of channel 4 on Mats, and I will use the output of this channel into the first VCA of Modemix to shape our sound a little bit. So now we have an envelope sculpting our sound, which sounds like this. Let's make the release a little bit longer. So this is just the envelope sculpting the sound, and the red cable is the offsetted inverted envelope that's been triggering together with the kick drum. This is essentially sidechaining the synth. Now we can achieve the same effect by using only one VCA if we use the envelope that's sculpting our sound to create the offset for our ducking VCA, or essentially just adding or summing the two envelopes together. And because our ducking envelope is a negative signal, this results in a sidechain effect too. we can do this all inside mats. So let me go back to channel 1 of mimick. Let me disconnect this. So the gated pattern from Pamela is still coming in channel 4 of mats. The trigger from the kick drum is coming into channel 1. It's inverted. We created an offset with channel 3. I'll remove this offset. Now let me show you what's happening. The sum output from mats is going into zero scope. Currently we're only seeing the envelope on channel 4. If I add the inverted envelope from the kick drum, you can see this really strange shape on zero scope. And if we connect this sum, the sum of both envelopes, into the control voltage input on mimick, we again have the sidechained compression effect. Now in this patch there's a lot going on, but most of it has nothing to do with the pseudo or fake sidechain compression. Let's listen. So I have Odessa pen to the left, Generate pen to the right. The envelope that's controlling the amplitude of both VCOs is the top one of dual ADSR. So Odessa is going through the MA35 and Generate is going through ripples. There's a gate coming out of Pamela. It's a random gate. It's going into the first ADSR on dual ADSR. The envelope output is melted with a stackable. One of them is going into mix mode, which is a mixer. The other one is going to the CV of the filter, and I have another cable stacked on top of the stackable that's connected to the CV input of the ripples. So both Odessa and Generate 3 are going through a filter which is controlled by the top ADSR envelope, and I'm sending it into the mixer too. I'll add some drums. The kick and snare are coming out of Erica Synth's Pico drums. I'm triggering it from Pamela. The signal is melted with a stackable, just like before, and is going into the second ADSR of the dual ADSR. And this is creating the ducking envelope. But at the moment, it's still a positive envelope. Now this mixer, mix mode by SSF, has little switches beside the knobs to invert whatever is coming into it. So the envelope controlling the filters is also going into the first channel of mix mode, which is just normal, it's not inverted. And I have the second envelope, which is being triggered at the same time as the kick drum, going into the second channel of mix mode, and it's inverted by flipping the switch down. It's a DC coupled mixer, which means it can handle DC, so constant voltages and slowly changing voltages like LFOs or envelopes, which in this case we're using it for. So the envelope is inverted, but it's not added to the signal yet. The output of mix mode is going into zero scope, and the output is melted to a VCA for Odessa and to the harmonic level input of the odd channel on Generate. So essentially, whatever is coming out of mix mode is controlling the amplitude of the synth sounds. Now I'll add the ducking envelope, and you can hear how now it's bumping like it would be with sidechain compression. So essentially we're doing exactly the same thing as we were doing before when we were summing the envelopes with mats. We're just summing the envelopes inside another mixer. So the envelopes that control and sculpt the sound are the top ADSR, and the envelope that's been triggering at the same time with kick is the bottom ADSR. We have inverted it, we are mixing it in a mixer, and it's going to VCAs essentially to control the amplitude. So with this setup, Odessa and Generate 3 are controlled by the same envelopes. So they're triggered at the same time, and they're sculpted the same way with the same envelope. But if you want different envelopes for your chords, and let's call it our bass, it's not possible with this setup. So I'll rewire some things. I will come back to this. So I have repatched some things. So right now I've patched up both VCOs in a classic analog synth way. So Odessa is going through a filter with some modulation on the cutoff, and Generate is going through another filter with some modulation on the cutoff too. Right now the kick drum and the bass and the chords are in each other's way, so they're clashing a little bit. It sounds a little bit undefined and muddy. I'm going to add the pseudo or fake sidechain to this patch. At the moment, channel 1 of dual ADSR is still controlling the MA35. It's controlling the cutoff modulation as well as the amplitude, because MA35 has two built-in VCAs. The output of the MA35 is going into hex mix VCA, but there's no control voltage patched to the control voltage input, so it's going straight through. Generate 3 is going through ripples. The output is going into hex mix VCA as well, and there's also no control voltage connected, so it's going straight through as well, as you can hear. The bottom channel of dual ADSR is still connected to the trigger of the kick drum, and I have the output going to my mixer. The output of my mixer is going into the zero scope and is going to this yellow cable, which I'll connect in a moment. So right now the envelope that's triggering at the same time as the kick drum is still positive, so we need to invert it. You can do this by flipping this switch to the down position, and this is coming out of the output of the mixer through zero scope into this yellow cable, and I'll plug it in hex mix VCA So it's controlling the amplitude of the sounds after all the modulation and the amplitude shaping and sculpting. So in this setup, the sidechain is added at the very end of the chain. So I connect it to channel for Odessa, and with this angled cable I connect it to the channel of Generate 2. But as you can hear, there's no sound, and this is because the envelope is negative, and because HexMix is a unipolar VCA. It's not a 4-quadrant multiplier, it's a dual quadrant multiplier, so it's a normal VCA. You can't do ring mod with the HexMix VCA because it ignores the negative control voltages you send in. So as we saw in every example I've shown, you have to offset the inverted envelope to make this work. So for this I'm using the purple cable, which is connected to the output of the second channel on mats, just to make an offset. I'm plugging it into the mixer. So I'm summing it or adding it to the signal, and as you can see, this boosts the envelope, which is inverted above 0. You can see how I can adjust this. So right now there's no offset. You can adjust it to the point where the envelope is completely above 0. But I find if you back it off a little bit, it sounds better for that pumping sidechained compression effect. So in my opinion, this is the best way to make fake sidechain compression in Eurorack. You make your patch, you sculpt your sound, you do whatever you want with it. Doesn't matter what it is. It can be chords or bass or samples or even other drums or percussion. It doesn't matter. Whatever you want to sidechain, you just make it as you want it. And instead of connecting the output of your sounds to the mixer, you connect it to a VCA. And you send in an inverted, offsetted envelope that triggers at the same time as the kick drum. You send that control voltage into the CV input of the VCA. And in this way, you can sculpt your sound or track or drone or whatever made up of different sounds with different amplitudes or different filters. And you just sidechain it afterwards. With this patch, I'm going to show you a few ways to mimic sidechain compression without the use of VCAs. The trace on zero scope is an LFO coming from Pamela's new workout. It's a modified sine wave which resembles a ramp wave, and it's perfect for our goal. By the way, Pamela's new workout is a digital module which only produces positive envelopes and triggers. So all the LFO shapes in Pamela, they're all positive. If you want a bipolar VCA, you need to offset those with a negative voltage. But this is coming straight from Pamela into zero scope, and the output of zero scope is patched up to the cutoff of the M835 filter. Currently the control knob for the CV input is at 0, so there's no effect. So I'm going to turn down the filter cutoff manually, and I'll let the LFO coming from Pamela, open it up. And if your kick has a so-called 4 to the floor pattern, this works great. Let me add some drums. Now there's other ways to achieve this with an LFO. Next to mix mode you can see the frequency central wave runner. I've patched it up already with a multed trigger from the kick drum, so it's synchronized to the beat. I'm gonna disconnect the LFO coming from Pamela and I'll connect the wave runner. And already you can see and hear how this works just as well. And this will work with every LFO that has a ramp wave in it. Now Wave Runner has a neat feature where you can distort the wave. And this is really useful for those sidechain effects. As you can see, most part of the LFO is above 0 when I turn the distort knob fully to the left. Now if you don't have this feature, and for some reason you find this a little bit too aggressive, you can always offset your LFO signal in a mixer or in mats. So let's try this. I'll connect the output of the Wave Runner to mats. And I'll connect the sum output of mats to zero scope. So at these settings, yeah, I have another signal here. Let me change that. So at these settings, the LFO is just going straight through mats. But I can offset it with another channel. Let me attenuate it a little bit. So after some tweaking, you can get it to a shape you like. Now the bass in this patch, the sound is just the full output of Generate going straight into the mixer. But I have the trigger for the kick melted into the 4th channel of mats. And I have an envelope that's going to the linear FM input on Generate. And this linear FM at its default setting is through 0 linear FM. So whenever the envelope going into the FM input is 0, so with a slow attack, like here, the start of the cycle is close to 0. If you send that signal into a true 0 FM input, the VCO core stops. It slowly rises in pitch, until it gets to the point where the envelope is at its highest. You can use these kinds of tricks to mimic a kind of sidechain effect. Of course, in this patch, there's not a lot of pitch information left, but sometimes it just works. So we have fake sidechain just by using the filter cutoff. We have pseudo sidechain using through 0FM. You can use LFOs for this, which are bipolar because you can offset them. Even if you can't offset them, it sounds okay too. And you can use envelopes to make pseudo sidechain effects too. I hope by showing you these different methods, showing you these examples, that you'll find a way to make that sidechain compression effect in Eurorack without having to buy a separate compressor module. I hope you learned something. Thanks for watching.